Hello there. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Marche Butler, and I am the webinar director here at Advice Chaser. Before we introduce our guests and get started, I do need to do a bit of legal housekeeping. Advice Chaser, the host of this webinar, is not a registered investment advisor. We cannot and do not give financial advice. Today's presentation is for educational purposes only and cannot be considered advice for any person's individual situation. Advice Chaser regularly hosts informative webinars such as this one, featuring a variety of knowledgeable professionals, many of whom are licensed advisors. Any opinions, ideas, jokes, or principles expressed by presenters are their own, and however true, funny, or interesting, are not endorsed by Advice Chaser. Please do not act on the information you hear today without consulting a qualified financial professional. We're thrilled to bring you this educational presentation today. Attendees are muted, but we do encourage you to ask questions using the chat box, and the presenters will answer those queries during or after the webinar today as appropriate. If you ask a question in the chat box, go ahead and leave your phone number or email address as well. And if we can't get to your question, we'll make sure someone reaches out to you after today's event. We want this experience to be as educational as possible, so please don't hesitate to ask for clarification or expansion of the material. I'd like to introduce you to our guests today. Sheldon Sweeney is extremely passionate about helping families and their children with special needs. He connects with them on a personal level because his youngest daughter has Down syndrome. Sheldon enjoys helping families who are planning for retirement, as well as business owners who need advice on creating an exit plan while protecting the businesses they have built. Starting in 2012, Sheldon built his business at Pacific Capital Resource Group, Inc. in Bellevue, Washington as a financial advisor, establishing niches. Sheldon then received an opportunity to move his business to Snyder Financial Group as a wealth advisor in 2019. Sheldon holds 3 designations: the Chartered Special Needs Consultant, Retirement Income Certified Professional, and the Chartered Financial Consultant. He is also life and disability licensed. And Sheldon, why don't you go ahead and say a couple words and say hello so we can see you on camera.
All right, thank you, Marche. Great to be here. And I'm very excited to hear from Lisa on her topic of these person-centered plans today.
Very good. Well, I'd love to introduce our speaker today. Lisa Fox-Latchford is currently the president of Fox Associates. She has over 30 years of experience in the field of developmental disabilities, and her professional focus has been to contribute to quality employment opportunities for adults with disabilities in private and public companies. As a private consultant, she provides training and consultation at the local, state, and national level. She is a visionary leader with experience in marketing, public speaking, leadership, strategic planning, management, training, and facilitation. Lisa holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in speech communication with an emphasis in marketing from St. Mary's College, Notre Dame, Indiana. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to you, Lisa. We're very excited to have you speak today.
Thank you, Marche and Sheldon. Welcome, everyone, to Person-Centered Planning for People with Disabilities. We are glad that you're here today and honored to give you some information on this really important topic. So what's possible today? We're going to talk about person-centered planning. What is it? How can I access it? What's the process? What is the planning that happens? There's several meetings that happen. What are the topics? What are the follow-up meetings? And then finally, any thoughts that you have that you can put in the chat box. We'd love for you to ask questions throughout this program. Anytime you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat box. And Sheldon is going to be my assistant today and monitor the chat box. Thank you, Sheldon.
Happy to do so.
So to begin, what is person-centered planning? It is a unique opportunity to invite people who know you well And I'm thinking of the individual with a disability to invite people they know to come to their house and have a facilitator facilitate this person-centered planning process. It gives the individual a chance to have a holistic plan about their whole life, to have their voice of what they want in their life, and then to get the support from the individuals that know them to make steps towards goals for their future. So the question is here, when can you use the person-centered planning process? Well, anytime in an individual's life. However, where we find it to be most effective is when there's big transitions. Maybe it's transitioning from middle school to high school. Maybe it's transitioning from high school to transition. Maybe you want to move out of your parents' house someday, and you're out of school and it's a big step to do that. Maybe you're moving out of state. Anytime there's a big change in life is a great time to have a person-centered plan and get support from people who know you. So oftentimes people will ask, what is the difference between a person-centered plan and an IEP, and how do they differ? Well, a person-centered plan complements and supports an individual education plan. Many teachers have told me it's been so helpful to have a person-centered plan for the individual education plan. They copy and paste the skills, the strengths, what works, what doesn't work into the individual education plan. We know that oftentimes the individual education plan can be based on deficit and can talk about, what limits the person, what may be barriers. In a person-centered plan, we talk about a positive possible future for the individual's goals, dreams, and to support systems in and out of school. How is a person-centered plan developed? Well, it's a 3-meeting process. The first meeting is to get to know the individual and to start asking some of these big questions. What are your hopes and dreams for the future? Which is a really big question for all of us. I think back when I was young, I really didn't know what work was all about, or I didn't know what the world would be like outside of school. I was used to having my backpack and my locker. I didn't know what the work world would be like, or a future outside of the house, outside of school. So we start asking those questions. And then the planning meeting is where it could be at your home, it could be at school, it could be at a community center, a private meeting room, where you invite people to come together. A facilitator, a qualified facilitator, guides the individual and the group through a process. And we're going to go through those topics today. And then the important thing is we follow up. So we have a recap meeting about a month later to do some next steps for a month, see how it goes. And then we do next steps for a year. So a person-centered planning meeting is an opportunity to plan your next year with really concrete next steps. And that's really where the inspired action happens, where people who know me can come and support me. I know that it's a valuable process to ask someone for support. And it's also an honor to be on the other end and being asked to support someone I know.
And Lisa, this is Sheldon. Well, we did have a question that came in, and then I kind of also had a question for you while we're on this slide. So the first question that came in says, how long have person-centered plans been around?
That is a great question. Person-centered planning started back in the 70s by 2 people in Atlanta, John O'Brien, Connie O'Brien, and then Jack Pierpont joined later, and Marcia Forrest. And the idea was to say, how can we support individuals that want meaningful opportunity in the community? And we've seen different times where person-centered planning has really been robust in individuals' lives. In 2016, the Federal Community Mental Health Services, or community CMS, the Medicaid services, CMS, excuse me, said that each person who receives funding, basically, from the government through waiver services was required to have a person-centered service. And so there's been a real resurgence in looking at person-centered planning. Even though that came from a government level, we found that it's been really effective. Teachers have loved it. Families have really found it to be beneficial, and the individuals themselves have achieved goals because of the person-centered planning process.
And then I thought I'd just mention, personally, Lisa, I mean, I have my youngest daughter has Down syndrome. So what does that feel like as you're entering the process? We haven't done this before. What does it feel like what words do we use to explain that to my daughter?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sheldon. If I had a chance to meet your daughter, I would ask her what are her hopes and dreams for the future? What are her strengths? What are her skills? And how can we align those skills and strengths with the things that she wants to make connections in the community for those things she wants? One student I met wanted to get connected to swimming and find places where she could go swimming. Another individual I met said that she wanted to share her art. So she started painting, and then she ended up selling her paintings at the local farmer's market. And now she's known as an artist in her community, which is a beautiful thing. I think of students that wanted to get their first paid job right out of school. What's possible? What does that look like? Who are the connections in the community who can help me? So it really starts with the conversation with your daughter. What is it that you would like to explore? What would you like to try? Like my story, I really didn't know coming out of school, God, what is possible? A lot of us come out, we just know school. So oftentimes we can start with, well, could we explore some things? Could we try some things? Could we do some job shadowing? Can we get out in the community and meet people to see what's possible and what would align with my interests?
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. I'll let you get through another slide or two. We have one more question that came in, but I'll save it for 2 more slides.
Okay, great. Thanks for the questions. Who attends the person-centered planning meeting? It starts with the individual choosing and wanting a plan for their future to support everything in their life. Of course, my family, having a neutral facilitator. When we talk about neutral, we need someone who doesn't know me, so that they come in with no biases or organizational biases, that kind of thing. And sometimes people want to do planning within organizations. We advocate for a neutral, qualified, person-centered planning facilitator, and people who love and support me. It could be my teachers, my assistant teachers, doctors, therapists, friends, coaches. I see a lot of coaches. I've seen speech therapists, occupational therapists, social workers. I've seen my neighbors. I've seen places that I go and volunteer, people I volunteer with, coworkers that I've worked with in the past. It really can be anyone who you know and you like, and that supports you and loves you and wants you to be successful and wants to support you to achieve your dreams. So what happens during the planning meetings? The first meeting I talked about is that meet and greet and start to ask questions. My first question I always ask individuals is, what are great things people say about you? What are great things about you? And it really opens up that positive atmosphere to start thinking about, well, what are great things about me? What are my successes? What are my unique strengths? And then that full meeting, the person-centered planning meeting, we talk about, what are your interests? What are you currently doing? What are your hopes and dreams for the future? And then we start really setting those goals. And it's that planning creation that happens over the 3-meeting process, where we start asking these questions, we start thinking about them, maybe we talk about them with our family at the dinner table in between meetings. We're starting to think about, gosh, what do I want for my future? And it's that positive possibility that really energizes us. motivates us, and also brings that bigger support system or team, or we call it circle of support around me to support me with the things I want in my future. They may be people that are, in school, teachers that are paid to support me, also people that are not paid, or my friends and my family and people in my community.
So as we transition slides, Lisa, the other question that came in, this is such obviously we're getting the picture of such holistic planning. So the question is, what sort of training do facilitators need to have?
Great question. My belief is that individuals have a good training to start. What we provide in Washington State, and many other states provide this as well, is having a 2-day full intensive person-centered planning facilitation training. And that could be that many hours over a course of many days. If you have 2 hours a day online, it can look different formats. We've seen, of course, during the pandemic, more information has been provided online and can be very effective as well. Then having a mentor, someone who is an experienced person-centered planning facilitator, so that you can watch them do the work and then they can observe you do the work and give you really valuable feedback. We do that as well. And then that continuing connection to the leaders, the facilitators that are doing the work, to have a learning community. So we also advocate that person-centered planning facilitators be part of a learning community that meet with at least once a month to talk about successes, strategies, things that work well and don't work well, so that we can support each other to continue to have the best quality person-centered planning facilitation. Great question. Something I'm very passionate about. Thank you for asking. So one of the first things we ask in the person-centered plan is, tell me about your history. Where were you born? What's your background? What were important events in your life? What's important to you? What were important to your family? I oftentimes hear families say, oh, we love to travel. We like to go camping. I remember my earliest memory of my son or my daughter was that they loved to bike ride or play ball in the neighborhood. It brings up a lot of things I did when I was little. And we find sometimes I may have done something when I was little, but then I don't do it later in life. And I remember one student I worked with said, oh, I remember I used to swim. I want to swim again. Another student said, gosh, I remember I love the camera, but I haven't used a camera. I'd like to buy a camera and take photos. And that student actually liked to go to the farmer's market and take photos of vegetables. So that was her passion. And so she did. She out of her plan, she ended up buying a camera and pursuing photography. We also talk about, what works for you and where you may have challenges, health or medical issues. One student I worked with, we, through discussion in the person-centered plan, realized that stairs were really challenging for her and uneven ground was challenging. And what we came up with for her and her plan was actually having a dog to support her, and that stability, and also navigating terrain. That individual, that student, she had trouble seeing, and the dog could help with that. So there was a lot of pieces there that we kind of strategized who could support you, what professionals also could support us, particularly in those health and medical issues. Talk about people who can support me. Some of those people could be close to my home, and there are other people that may be out of state that support me. Through the pandemic, we had person-centered planning online, which was a unique opportunity to have grandma in another state involved, friends in another state involved. Having those relationships can get recorded in the plan is a really wonderful opportunity to say, these are all the people that believe in me and support me. It's a wonderful feeling. And we talk about the things that, what are the values and things that you really want in your life for a meaningful life, a life that you feel really fulfilled. What are the things you like, and what are the things you don't like or don't like to do? One student shared with me that he doesn't like loud noises, intermittent noises like a fire alarm. Another student shared with me that he loves video games and certain types of video games. So you get to know a lot about an individual through this process. And oftentimes the people who support them learn how we show up differently in different environments. So my strengths may be, on the soccer field for a student may be different how I show up with my strengths in school, or maybe how I show up when I volunteer or in my work environment. So we talked a lot about skills and strengths and interests. And that really warrants taking the time and creating that space for us to explore, how do we show up? And oftentimes the people who come to the plan see our skills and strengths unique to the environment that we're in. My skills and strengths, like we talked about, can be different maybe when I'm out on a stage rather than when maybe I'm home. And it's wonderful to hear from the people in the room say all these things about me, my skills and my strengths. And then we start thinking about what we call transferable skills. Like, what is something that I do at home that I could do in the community? One student I worked with can do his laundry and he folds his clothes. So we explored, well, could he do that for a job? So you start thinking about, gosh, where is my skill set and where can I be successful? Now this piece of what works for you and what doesn't work for you, we really delve into the things that support me. I do well with a routine. I do well with structure. I do well with a checklist, with pictures. What doesn't work for me is not knowing what to expect. I do really well when I know what to expect, when expectations are clearly defined. This area really supports us to support the individual in those future environments where their transition happens, whether it be a new home, whether it be leaving school and going into the community to work. And there is crossover here for the environment as well, for what works and what doesn't work. Particularly, we explore this when we're going to a new school or we're going to work for the first time. What does that environment need to look like for me to be most successful? Do I do well with a big team of people? Do I do well working one-on-one? Does the environment need to be kind of structured? Is it need to be quiet? Do I need to have space to be able to work on my own? All of these key pieces really help us understand, what would the environment need to look like for me to be most successful? And it's really helpful to delve into that, because that helps us with that process of finding the right school, finding the right to building those supports. And the same thing with the work environment, finding the right work environment and also designing the right support for me to be successful. Current state is really what it is. What am I currently doing? And what's my schedule? What's my day-to-day look like? And it's really specific. Like, when do I wake up? How do I wake up? Do I wake up with an alarm, or does mom wake me up? What does my day look like? Do I make breakfast, or does someone else make breakfast? Do I have a routine? Do I have structure? Do I go to school? How do I get to school? What do I do when I first get there? What does my day look like? What's my routine? All of those pieces really inform where I have time in my schedule to do other things. Also, it shows my interest, the support, how I learn, how people can best support me, what are my preferences and interests. All of those pieces come out when we start talking about our day. Do I have an internship at school that I go to? Am I currently working on the weekends or in the summers at night? Do I have hobbies? What are my likes and dislikes? What does my time look like when it's unstructured? What does my evening time look like? What do my Saturdays and Sundays look like? Now, the big question which is very daunting and can be oftentimes scary, particularly when you're coming out of school, is what do I want for my future? What do the people that support me, my family, my mother, my father, what do they want for me? What is my desire? Do I want to go to higher education? Do I want to try employment? Do I want to build friendships, which is oftentimes harder when I leave school? I'm around a lot of other kids. They can look very different in the community where we really need to be intentional to build relationship. What are my life goals? What's possible for me in the next year? So we're just kind of looking through the lens for just a little bit. What's the next year going to look like? What do I want to learn? I love that question. It's such an important question. Oftentimes I hear, well, I'd like to learn how to use a certain technology. I'd like to learn an instrument. I'd like to learn a new job. What's possible for your future?
I had, Lisa, another question for you. And this one's just from me. But I was wondering, are there times, like, because I can see how that could be daunting for somebody and I know you're there to help bring clarity, but are there times where someone might just shut down on this and they don't know and then it goes back to your skill set to kind of create that safe environment? Or are there, in that context, are there plans that just you have to kind of stop and regroup and come back later?
There are definitely times where we need to shorten the meeting process. Oftentimes online, you may have saw that, Sheldon, that it was hard to be online all day. And
Mhm.
then now you have a planning meeting after that. So what we did is we did half-hour segments for 4 different times. So the person-centered planning meeting usually is a full 2-hour meeting, which can be really long and overwhelming. And a lot of times individuals, it's hard to be talked about, like, or the focus to be on me for 2 hours, that's hard. So if we could break it up into smaller meetings, I oftentimes with some individuals where this process can be overwhelming, or there's a lot of stimuli through the whole process of being focused on, I try to do one-on-one with them and their advocate beforehand to prepare. Maybe we do a collage, maybe we make a collage of pictures that you've already taken of things you're really successful, things that you can bring to the process that are really positive and that you can point to and reference throughout the process. So it really is unique to the individual, and it should be where they feel comfortable. It's their meeting. The way I start the process and many facilitators is, why are we here? And the student will say, to help me plan my future, or I want a job, or, and that is why we're here. We're here to support you. And this, like you said, should be an environment where you feel comfortable.
Awesome, thank you. I knew you had tools of how to deal with that, but that makes a ton of sense sometimes to have to do it in segments. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheldon. Great question. I love the interaction here, and thank you all those online today for your questions. So when we think about, why do we plan? If you think about in life, if we don't have a plan and having what's known as SMART goals here on the right, what we want for our future is just a wish. And a plan really puts the ideas and the things we want into concrete next steps. And sometimes the next step is very simple. I want to explore traveling. I want to explore trying some tasks in a certain area. So when we put it in a very specific, measurable way, I want to do this by this date, we also include who can support me with each step. So maybe my parent is supporting me with learning how to take the bus to my new internship. Maybe my teacher is supporting me with practicing the skills at work. Maybe my employment consultant is supporting me on the internship. Maybe my neighbor is supporting me with getting connected to a manager at a business that aligns with the work I want to do. And we put a very specific next step there. This is what I want to achieve by the date, very specific in the next month, what the date, what that date could be, and who can support me. Then the very important thing, so this is a living, breathing document that's active, that I can work with my support, is we follow up. We follow up, follow up, follow up. Have we achieved it? Great. Cross it off. Do we need to take another step towards that goal? What is the step? And then we keep changing my future goals as things change. I've got a job now. Now I want to support getting more active in the community with art classes or cooking classes. I want to get more independent skills to move on my own. I want to learn money management, whatever it may be that's really important to you to be steps towards your goals. Maybe it's living independently on your own someday. So the piece is having a plan with next steps and who can support me with achieving each next step. Like we mentioned, the follow-up meetings are so important. Follow-up, if you think of the IEP, it's once a year, and Sheldon, you've probably maybe been involved with individual education plans. And then, there's so much that happens in a year. So what if we followed up on a more regular basis with the people who are supporting me? And after the plan is completed, the facilitator fades back. They're just there for that planning process. We want to have someone that's then the person who can support the individual to achieve those goals. And that could be the employment consultant. That could be a teacher. That could be a parent. And that one person really supports that individual with making all those connections, the things that they want in their plan, the next steps they set forth. We celebrate benchmarks. My gosh, I know a student recently that was the first individual with Down syndrome to attend the local college, and it was on our local TV station. It was a huge celebration for him, and his mother advocated time and time again with every application they sent to colleges, finally getting in, and then he graduates, and there was a huge success, and he's back on the news again when he succeeded with his graduation, his degree. Building confidence. I meet so many individuals that left school that didn't have a plan, that are sitting home for many years, and their confidence is low. They're like, what can I do now? I see my brother's gone on to go to college and then on to work. I see my friends have done that, and the confidence can be pretty low. So having a plan, oftentimes I've done that with individuals that have left school many years ago, and they really want a sense of direction and support with achieving the things that they want for themselves to be successful. And really this process increases the likelihood of success. Rather than it being a wish for my future, I have a plan. I have what I often say is a roadmap. And you can tell that I'm very passionate about this because I have worked over my 30 years with hundreds of individuals. I mean, literally. And I've seen that individuals, this changes their perspective, and they see that the small steps I make towards my future actually reveal the possibility that I've seen for myself, or my family has seen for me, that is possible for me to achieve the things I want to achieve and have the success that I dream for myself. So we talked a lot of pieces here about person-centered planning, and we've talked about the benefits. We've talked about ideas for this roadmap to support my son or daughter or individuals with things that they want in their life. Any questions you have for us or for me?
Yeah, Lisa, let's give, another batch of questions just popped up. Let's see. So often you make a plan, but it's really hard to follow through. Besides follow-up meetings, what are some tips on working on the goals in your plan once you establish it?
Great question. Each individual step has its own timeline. It may be something that can be achieved in an hour. It may be something that can be achieved over several months. It's really breaking down the steps that are achievable steps for me. And which I loved the idea of celebrating the success. And it's really unique to every individual. What does that look like? One student I worked with, the success was being active every day after she was done with school. And she was used to getting up and going to school. So now she was sitting home and doing video games and watching TV. So the success can be unique to every individual, and making the connections of the people who can support me is my best advice. The plan can spur ideas from the people who know me, and then who are more people in the community that I can align with and connect with to achieve the things I want to achieve.
All right, thank you. And then this question has to do with how you can fund a person-centered plan. And I'm thinking this might vary state to state, county to county. So it's worded, if it says, if you're doing estate planning for your child with special needs, can you provide funding and plans for your child to use person-centered planning?
Great, another great question. I love your questions. It is dependent on the area that you live in. The first thing I would do is reach out if you have services with your developmental disability services in your state and your son or daughter receives case management services. I would start there, ask them. If there's local county funding, I would reach out to your local county. If there is state funding, maybe through your vocational rehabilitation service, I would reach out to them. I would ask your parent groups. There's oftentimes ARC programs in your local area that will know if there is something locally. I would ask your teachers if your son or daughter's in school, have you heard about person-centered planning? Many teachers have been trained in it when they were in school, may or may not be utilizing it or know what the services are. I oftentimes train teachers, so we're bringing it back into the school. So it really could be something that you can access through that area as well. Sometimes schools will fund person-centered planning, and that is really dependent again on the school.
And I think, Lisa, the thought that always goes through my head is this seems like like one of those best kept secrets that not everybody is exposed to. And it feels like there would be opportunities outside of our special needs community. I mean, are there times where people would approach you and say, I love the sounds of this, we're great for my son or daughter, what about me? Or, something outside of our special needs umbrella.
Yes, actually, I went to the store the other day and I was buying supplies for person-centered planning, and the gentleman around behind the cashier said, well, could you do a plan for me? And I said, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I personally had 2 plans. When I started my own business, when I actually also am a singer and I did singing in the past, and it was scary to start something new. And oftentimes in our society, we don't ask for support. We try to do it on our own. And to have my friends and family around the kitchen table, asking them for their support is such a beautiful, beautiful place to be, and also a vulnerable place to be. And oftentimes when I train facilitators, the first thing we do is help them have a plan, because it's really important, if you're going to be a planner, to know what it feels like to be on the other side, to be thinking about your hopes and dreams for the future and asking for the support as well.
So tied to this question about can anyone do a person-centered plan, the follow-up from the audience said, who usually initiates it?
And the follow-up, I would ask the question, is it they initiate, is the question?
I think I can't tell if the context is if it's in like mom and dad, for their kid, or if it's someone outside, not dealing with a special needs situation in their family. So maybe we spent most of the time talking about families with special needs. Maybe we'll stay in that context. So who would initiate the plan and reach out to someone like you?
It varies. That oftentimes a parent can reach out, a teacher can reach out, employment professional that's working with the student reaches out, county professionals, state professionals, really does vary. And I find that it's the people who are educated and know about this
Mhm.
secret.
Mhm.
They're like, oh, if you thought about a person-centered plan, it's this idea that this is kind of this unknown thing, which I feel like is so helpful. It is so helpful, particularly when I may have areas where I need support that I don't know what that's going to look like when I leave school. I have my support now, but gosh, I have to chart this whole new path. What's that going to be like? And how can I still be connected and have a fulfilling life and be successful? This process is so helpful. And the parents that I know that found out about this trade secret or whatever we're calling it, they have had multiple plans with their sons or daughters created the connection where like every 2 years they had a plan. And it's really fun when you look back and you go, oh, we achieved the son or daughter can go, I achieved, look at that, I achieved that, I achieved this, the things the milestones that they want. And I know some families that'll sit down on New Year's Day and they'll get out some blank pieces of paper and markers and they'll say, gosh, what do we want for the next year for each of us individually? And then we do one for our family. What do we want for our family? And it's a beautiful thing when you put pen to paper and think about what's possible. It's fun when you can put some pictures and images and art towards it too. It's a beautiful connection.
Well, I think, Lisa, somehow you struck a note and the questions are pouring in now. So if you want to get some water or something, there's just like 3 more that just popped up. And this one I think ties into that last question well. It says, how is this different than hiring a coach or a therapist?
The difference is that the person-centered planning facilitator is not a therapist, does not go into any type of therapy realm. And the neutral facilitator is not a coach. The facilitator really captures and records the things the individual says that they want, the things that the group says that you're strong at, your skills, your strengths, what you've tried. Your mother may remember when you were 3 better than you do. So your history really is captured maybe by family and what you're currently doing. Your teacher's probably going to know more than your parent because their teacher's with you those hours. So it's a holistic plan really of capturing. So the facilitator, that's their role, is to make sure that they capture everything so that the individual feels that their positive possible future is laid out on paper. What do I want? And they can see the tangible steps that can be achieved with the people that support me. Then it's up to that one person and that individual. There's there's the student or the youth or the individual that's receiving the plan and the person that can support them to be the cog in the wheel, to keep in touch with all the people that said they would support me with the individual steps. And then that's the coaching or the individual coaches that are involved, teacher or employment professional. So the facilitator really is there to facilitate a plan that really is an action-oriented, inspired plan for my future.
And then how long does a person-centered plan last? Is it always a year?
Oftentimes people will say things that maybe are further than a year. Like, I want to have my own home someday. I want to have a family. Maybe it's bigger things that would transpire over many years. It's important to make sure that the plan can be achievable. And that's why we look out 1 year in advance. But certainly there are pieces that people have come back to me many years later that they say, oh, I achieved what I want to achieve. I finally moved out on my own. And, so it might not be within that, next 12 months. But however, it really kind of puts that beacon of light towards the future, what I think is possible. And Then I start making steps. Oftentimes, we're just really exploring. What do I really want? You know, I'd like to travel. I don't know where I'd like to travel. I'd like to get a job. I haven't really seen that many jobs. I'd like to try some job. You know, I'd like to explore technology. I might need further schooling in that. I want to go visit some colleges. But really, it's a starting point. And I encourage people that maybe see that there's a lot of future work past that year to do another plan, or continue to work the plan that you have and change it and adapt it, use it as your foundation.
All right, this next one appears to be the last question. And it says, how early should I start the process before a transition?
Great question. My belief in transition, if you could do it 2 years prior to transition, gives you ample time to really explore all the pieces. A lot of times I see it pushed back into the spring of your graduation year, and there's not much time, and there's so much that's happening at school. If we could do it at the beginning of 2 years, the fall of my second to last year, that would be great. Give me 2 years to really achieve the things I want to achieve. Try things. You've got a great support network in school.
Awesome. I love it. Lisa, maybe just to touch back on that one comment. Remember the one between the therapist and the coach versus facilitating. It sounds like as a facilitator, you're really igniting that community around the person, and then they have to run with it, right? Like that's why it's so different from you as a facilitator. Your role, like you said, you step back.
That's absolutely correct. It really is inspired action, and the people there who can support me with the very specific next steps. And it becomes energizing for everyone, is particularly the individuals that I want this. And then they start seeing things happening. They're like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. I really can achieve the things I want to achieve. And oftentimes with support, that's the piece. I'd like to do this. And also, I may have always had one area of support. I've always been in school. I've always had a teacher. I've always lived at home. I've always had maybe support at home. What does that support look like in the community? Who could be there for me? What do I need? All these pieces we really lay out really concretely in this planning process. And then changes happen in my life, and maybe my support needs or the things that I want or how I can achieve them can change. That's when it's good to have another plan.
Yeah, sounds so much more sustainable that way when you have that community around the person. But all right, thank you. I don't see any more questions that have come up.
Well, thank you so much, both of you. And that's about all the time we have anyway, so that's great. On behalf of Advice Chaser, we want to thank our speakers and the organizations that have worked with us to bring you this webinar today. Thank you so much for attending, and look for an email soon with a link to the replay of this event. You're welcome to share that replay with your friends and family. Here at Advice Chaser, we're all about helping you find a financial advisor who's a great fit for your life and your financial questions. Our matching service is free to you, and every one of our advisor partners has committed to offer a free initial consultation to anyone we introduce them to. Find out more by going to advicechaser.com and clicking on the link to find an advisor. Once again, from Advice Chaser, thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you at another webinar soon. Goodbye, everyone.